Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining everybody for another whiskey review and an unexpected second segment. Now, I've got a whole lot of reviews built up here, so I had a totally different agenda for this week's show. Then I got my hands on the old Granddad 7-year and just essentially centered the show around it. So we're going to go first into a review of this old Granddad 7-year. We'll see how it scores. Now, I'm actually recording this intro after I've already recorded everything else. So you see the smile on my face. Now, during that review, I suddenly got inspired and I was like, it'd be great if I went around the bar and I compared it to other 7 to 8 year age stated whiskeys that are all around 100 proof. So the second half of today's show is going to be a comparison of the old Granddad 7-year bottle and bond compared to the Wild Turkey 8-year 101 proof. And then I threw in the new Riff 8-year 100 proof. Wish I had the Heaven Hill bottle and bond on hand, but unfortunately for me, I drank all that one, so I'll have to do that comparison later. And if you're watching this as of the premiere of this video on Monday, July 14th, we are just now launching our Bardstown Bourbon Company single barrel over on Seal Box called Tater Cakes. So I'll talk about that a bit more after the intro here when we go through the barrel picks. But again, if you want to get some hands on some good whiskey, we are doing everything we can to bring it back to this community. And Tater Cakes very much lives up to all the barrel picks that we've come out with in the last year. So thank you for joining today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. We don't just review whiskeys here at Hello Again, Whiskey Friends. We also team up with other channels, go around the country, and find the best barrels we can to bring back to this community. If you're watching this the week that this video premieres, we are just now dropping our Bardstown Bourbon Company pick over on Sealbox. And very soon after that, we will also be dropping a Old Dominick 44% rye bourbon coming out of Memphis, Tennessee, and that one will be available on Shared Pour. We've also picked barrels from Copper and Cask and New Holland. So if you want to keep up with our barrel picks, follow us on Patreon or join our private Facebook group. Link in the description. Let's get into a review and see if this is a bottle that you should be hunting. Tell you what, I'm really excited to get back into this one. Last week, went to Northern Kentucky for a usual round of hunting, and I hit on something I wasn't expecting to find. The old Granddad 7-year, the new bottle and bond release here. Now, they say on the neck tag that this is a limited release. So you can see that right here. But really, this has been the main story of 2025 in the bourbon world thus far. The return of age statements. We said that that was going to be the theme of the year, dating back to last fall. And thus far, that's proved right with all these new releases. Now, I say I'm excited to get back into this one. So when I bought it, I got to have about 1 or 2 pours out of it to get my first impressions out of the way. I usually like to have multiple tastings with something before I then sit down with you and discuss it more officially. But the first impression, really impressed me. I thought it had great depth of character and a really good mouthfeel for something that's bottle and bond 100 proof. In terms of the price paid, this did run me back $43. So not too deep in the wallet for something that carries a 7-year age statement. So we'll quickly go through the nose, the palate, and discuss the finish before getting into the final score. All right, let's get into the nose first. Cheers, everybody. The profile on the nose is exactly what you'd expect. Lots of orange peel and clove, a little bit of the peanut shells. I even get a hint of cherry. But then there is this nice oak that holds it all together. Flavors are right down the middle where you would expect them to be, and not really too much to keep digging into. But overall, just a well put together, solid nose. All right, let's get into the taste. Cheers, everybody. On the palate, one thing that sticks out immediately is the mouthfeel of this whiskey, which is very surprising to say for it being proof down to 100. But as you can see in the glass here, and you can even see that ring at the top that's really hanging tight and just slowly dripping down, it does have an oily presence, and that is quite soothing on the palate initially. Now, the overall flavor profile, both at the front of the palate and going into the mid palate, is somewhat as expected based on what I was saying on the nose. So the general flavor range is going to be all centered around orange, a little bit of cherry, get a little bit of that Jim Beam nuttiness and a vanilla. And there's also that cinnamon and clove and some nice spice to it too. And then the whole thing is tied together by the oak. So I know it's almost the exact same talk track I said. On the nose, it does play through here. But there is a catch. It's actually quite sweeter than I expected. I mean, up front, and the sweetness really carries. It's almost like getting into a bag of the orange rings that are just covered in the sugar. That initial sugar sweetness blast that you get is pretty over the top and once again, delicious and unexpected in some ways. All right. Let's get into the finish. Cheers, everybody. And then as you get into the finish, all of those flavors continue to play through. The vanilla ramps up a little bit, as does the peanut shell. But really, the main event on the finish ends up being that oak. And the finish is less sweet than it was on the initial approach to going through mid palate. Tell you what, it's an impressive pour, especially for $43. So let's see how this one scored in the end. So here in the channel, we do have a robust scoring system. All these metrics behind the scenes build up to a flavor score, an experience score, and a value score. Aggregate all of those scores together, and we can see where this whiskey ranks compared to other whiskeys. And this one, I think, overachieves a little bit. Gave it an 82 out of 100. And for a whiskey that's only $43, that is really, really good value. So I think if you pick this one up, you won't be disappointed. And this is one that I would recommend if you like Jim Beam. This is one you should check out. You know, I didn't plan on doing this, but let's take a quick break here. I'm going to get everything cleared out. I want to do a head-to-head of this Old Grandad 7-year versus the Wild Turkey 8-year. So if you're curious about those results, stick around. I'll see you in just a minute. Whiskey friends love coffee, and some of the best coffee out there right now is coming from Drams Coffee Company. Fancy coffee for regular people. Katie and Ethan are always looking for ways to give back to this community. So if you leave a comment on this video with the hashtag #DriftingDrams, Katie and Ethan will be donating a $15 gift card, and we will be choosing a winner each month in our live show. So be sure to come back to future videos for more chances to win. And this week's winner is none other than J.A. Sells. Congratulations, Jonathan, and be sure to keep leaving those comments for more chances to win. All right, let's transition to the next segment. Whenever there's a question from the community or a topic you're interested in, we love covering it here. Let's see this week's topic. All right, let's make this interesting. I did not have this planned at all for today's content. But once it got into my head that I should compare this to the Wild Turkey 8-year, we're here, we're set up, let's just do it right now. Now, I went around the bar, I was looking for other releases to maybe compare this to as well. Because if you kind of think about this 100 proof bottle and bond kind of range, there are a lot of good bottles out there that are also carrying similar age statements. So we'll do the Wild Turkey 8-year, compare that to the Old Grandad 7-year. And then I'm going to throw in the new Riff 8-year. Just because I'm curious. Now, on the bar, I currently don't have a Heaven Hill bottle and bond. That would have been a good one for this comparison as well. So with the Old Grandad, just a reminder, this costs $43 and just scored an 82 out of 100 on our scoring system. Now, next up, and I'll of course be very careful not to break this turkey cork. That's actually pretty good shape. We're going to do the 8-year Wild Turkey 101. So another new release this year. And if I'm remembering correctly, this one scored a 78 out of 100 on our scoring system. So a little lower, at least independently with that tasting, than the Old Grandad. And then the last one that I'm going to throw in there is going to be the new Riff 8-year. Still coming in at 100 proof, but the big difference on this one is that the new Riff 8-year is going to cost you around $68. I think is the typical price I see this one for. So we'll pour a little bit out there. Now, I'm not going to do this blind. I think doing it in this format, I would know what each one is, regardless if I rotated the glasses or not. So we can just be upfront about them, compare them side by side, and do a little ranking here. So I'm going to go through the noses on each one very quickly, confirming the Old Grandad, dominant notes of orange with that oak. Now let's get into the Wild Turkey. Now, I haven't had this 8-year in a while, probably since I reviewed it a few months ago. So this will be a good reunion with this pour. It's got a mustier funk to it on the Wild Turkey. Orange is still there, but it really leans more spice heavy. All right, let's get into our third glass here. This one's going to be the New Riff 8-year. Now, a part of me always wonders with the New Riff 8-year if there is whiskey older than 8 years in this blend, because the amount of oak that is on this New Riff dominates what is happening with the Old Granddad 7-year and with the Wild Turkey 8-year. Profile over the top is just completely different from the first two. There's a lot of similarities going on with the Old Granddad and the Wild Turkey, whereas this New Riff is leaning more into cherries and berries and that type of fruit range with a little bit of honey and some tea notes. So if I were going to rank these off the nose, I'd go the New Riff, followed by the Old Granddad 7-year, with the Wild Turkey 8-year being in third place. Now let's get into the palate. Starting off with the Old Granddad, we'll go in for a sip and just confirm the thoughts that we just had in the prior review. Yeah, that main characteristic I'm getting again is that sweetness. That is very surprising how sweet this bourbon is. And just getting the waves of the orange, the vanilla, a little bit of that peanut shell, a little bit of the oak, all held together beautifully. This really is a gorgeous whiskey. All right, let's get into the Wild Turkey 8-year. Cheers, everybody. Wow. Tell you what, the Old Granddad and the Wild Turkey 8-year have a whole lot of similarities. The spice and the oak are a little more predominant on the Wild Turkey. You get a bit of that turkey funk too. I know they're the same proof. The Old Granddad was a bit more viscous with a little bit of a longer finish. So that's another interesting characteristic there as well versus the 101 Wild Turkey 8-year. All in all, I am digging the Wild Turkey 8-year more in this tasting than I have in prior tastings, but I still think it lacks something compared to the Old Granddad. It's like the flavors themselves in the Wild Turkey just aren't as cohesive as that Old Granddad 7-year. But darn, that's pretty close. Maybe even closer than the 4-point lead. I think the Old Granddad score's fine, but maybe the 78 on the Wild Turkey 8-year, maybe it could have gone up a point or two. All right, let's get in on this New Riff. And once again, to my point earlier on the New Riff before we even get into the taste, I mean, maybe the New Riff just isn't a fair example here, but this is 8 years, 100 proof. And this is 8 years, 101 proof. So that's what I was talking about with the New Riff. I mean, you can see it in that color there. It's just this beautiful, darker amber than you would expect for something that's 8 years. So it does make me wonder if there's something a little older in the blend. Wow, that's quite surprising. It's probably the combination of everything that's happening on the table right now. But the New Riff 8-year almost has this dusty vibe to it. I really, really love the cherry that I'm getting on that today. The oak, again, is much more pronounced. There's a lot of spice on this thing, too. So the general depth of the flavors and the transition and the ride it takes you on, the New Riff 8-year is my favorite of this particular lineup. Mouthfeel holds up as well. Though I know with New Riff, they do come in a little lower into the barrels too. All in all though, really walking away even more impressed with the New Riff 8-year off of this comparison. Now, the thing to keep in mind though, once again, the New Riff 8-year cost $68. So that's $25 more than the Old Granddad. Well, I'm going to rank these, but I'm pretty sure my rankings already are transparent. If I had these 3 pours in front of me, I would go with the New Riff 8-year first, followed by the Old Granddad 7-year, then to the Wild Turkey 8-year in last place. Another main takeaway from this comparison is just simply how similar the Wild Turkey 8-year and the Old Granddad 7-year is. They really do travel down very similar roads when it comes to the different flavor beats on the palate. So, final conclusion. Hey, Old Granddad for $43 holds up well, and I think it really does deserve a spot on your bar if you're able to find this. Now, what is also important is to find out, will it blend? So I am intrigued with the Wild Turkey and the Old Granddad being so similar. I'm going to blend these two together first before I add any type of New Riff. But a part of me is thinking like this is just going to taste the same with a little bit of turkey funk and spice to it. All right, so this is the Wild Turkey 8-year blended with the Old Granddad 7-year. Cheers, everybody. It's interesting. Sometimes you do this blending stuff and you're always surprised about the things that will mend together and the things that don't. And sometimes you get into these scenarios where it's almost like a division equation where things are canceling each other out. And somehow this Old Granddad Wild Turkey blend neutralized each other throughout most of the experience, but particularly on the finish where it fell off a cliff entirely. All right, so that's a failed experiment. Let's see if the new Riff 8-year can revive it. So we're gonna blend these two together. I'm gonna go about third of it, new Riff. We're gonna swirl, 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 get these all blended together. All right. Now, I have found that the new Riff does blend well with things. So this is going to be interesting to see if it counteracts what happened on that first round. Man, that is just really interesting tonight. The dusty vibes I'm getting off of this new Riff 8-year because it added those to the old Granddad, which then made me think more of a dusty old Jim Beam. Like I kind of just made a dusty old Jim Beam here. It even smells like a dusty old Jim Beam. So peculiar. The new Riff definitely added a lot of character back to this blend, but something about the finish still just doesn't work on these components. All right, that's enough fun, but if there's anything you're going to take away from today's video, it's that old Granddad 7 years, it's a legit pour. And for $43, you might not even be hesitant to blend it or to mix with it and have fun. So that does get a recommend from me if you see that on the shelf. All right. Well, thank you for joining today, everybody. If you stuck around to the end of the video, I really appreciate your support. As already discussed in this video, today is the Tater Cakes launch day, if you're watching this on the day that this video premieres. So go to Sealbox, check out our single barrel of Bardstown Bourbon Company. And just remember, you can always find more whiskey. Why, you can never have enough whiskey, friends. So take care of those around you, and we'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye, everybody. Shout out to our Patreon family. Couldn't do this without you. Please be sure to hit that like and subscribe. And if you're interested in checking out our barrel picks, check out our Patreon and our private Facebook group in the description. And we'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye, everybody.